Hi, my name's Dan Keane. I'm a composer, producer and musician based in London, and I'm incredibly excited to show you Petrichor, my new sample library with fracture sounds. Now this is a soft woodwinds textures library formed of baritone, tenor and alto saxophone, bass clarinet and B-flat clarinet, and bass, alto and concert flute, which sounds a little bit niche, but I find myself using it in all of the projects I do, from more kind of cinematic documentary style music through to pop arrangements and albums. It seems to work really well not only by itself, but as that glue between the other instruments that you've got. We love it when things move around and get a bit lively, but we also like stuff just to be still as well. And I would say that this is a sort of hover in the stasis. There's movement, but there's also restriction, which is really musical, really playable, and it sounds great, and I love it. Now, this is the sort of technical walkthrough. If you want to see the context as to why and how we made this thing, then watch the video down below, which is the launch video. This is more me taking you through the library, showing you everything there is to know about this product, and if it interests you, the link is down below and you can check it out. I decided to partner up with Fracture Sounds on this project because I wanted to marry my creative vision with a stellar team of developers. And the result is a library that is really, really intelligent. It's not heavy on the CPU, but it has some really clever features that I've never seen in a product before. And I think they're really, really awesome. And I think you're going to like them too. Smart Trills is amazing. I had this idea called sporadic trills, where you'd have different intervals, major second, minor third, major third. And the idea is that it's very unmeasured, it's very random, but it creates this beautiful coloration. Let me play you one of those samples. So you get a bit of that fundamental, you get that poking through of the note. And this is what's so great about recording as an ensemble, because the players are starting to work against each other. They can hear where someone's about to move and things like that. So it's really lovely. But I know that as a musician who went to music college and learned about theory and stuff like that, that it takes a different part of the brain to think about, what interval do I want there? Do I want it to go up a major second or a minor third? And I just wanted to be able to play a chord, a triad, and for it to know what the intervals were between the notes. And it's absolutely amazing. So what you're hearing in these smart trills is the actual recordings of them playing in major seconds, minor thirds, major thirds, but you're not having to think about the theory, you're just thinking about the chords. Now, as you could hear down here, there's no interval to be played with, so instead it plays a soft wisp instead. Now, if this low note here found a friend who was within that sporadic trills range, it gets added. But if I take it away again, it goes back to the wisp. So you get this beautiful transition. Basically, no matter what you play, it's going to sound beautiful. Now, these recordings are still available within the alt articulations. However, in the main NKI, you'll see smart trills, and this enables us to use the engine to identify what intervals are eligible for a sporadic trill to be played. Within the main articulations, we also have some more skullduggery under the hood in the form of blooms and spores. And these are engine-based selections of samples that you can also access by themselves within the alt articulations. I love that. Again, it's for that space in between the notes. You can use this in full arrangements and it just adds something to poke your head through and say, yep, we're still here and we're still moving. The Spores is clever because we've got these sustained notes, but we've also got sporadic short accents added in as well. So again, this is all sporadic. It's designed to kind of create a little bubble above the surface. And of course, if you hold down Shift, you can select multiple articulations at the same time if you'd prefer to mix and match a little bit. This library was recorded in 2 ensembles, high winds and low winds, and there's a 2-octave crossfade between the two. So if you're using the full ensemble, you'll never notice where the low winds stop and where the high winds begin. It's a really beautiful melee of sound. High winds and low winds were recorded slightly differently, thinking about the lower notes being a slightly purer tone that doesn't have quite so much chaos going on, versus the high winds, which have a lot more life to them. I like using these ensembles individually for their timbral differences, but the full ensemble just gives you such a lovely range and makes you feel like you're playing a keyboard instrument, which you're really not, but I'm glad it feels like that. Now, I encourage the players to be really experimental with it, still within restraints, because, as I said, I don't want this to be too lively, but I wanted it to be something where you could hold down just a single note and you'd feel like it was evolving and moving in some way. And the way that I've mixed these mics together, I don't know, there's just a beautiful stereo interplay where, again, you can just play very simple chords, but it really feels like it's taking you places. Next, soft accents. Now, I didn't want to do short notes in the way that you might typically expect, sort of staccato or staccatissimo, because it didn't really feel like it fitted with this style of library, but I did want some shorts in there because that was a note that we had from soft string textures. It's sort of like a soft tenuto, I would call it. Now, if I play that same chord progression a little harder, we get a longer feel. And I think that's quite musical because the way that I would play that as a chord, you can layer it in with your longs. Again, it's not supposed to be a rhythmic thing. It's more a gesture. It's an arrival. Within the library, we also recorded swells, which I think are quite important. They go up for a bar, they come down for a bar, and then they settle for a bar. We recorded these at 2 tempos, 90 BPM and 120 BPM, and you can access tempo synced swells within the alt articulations. Now, to me, this is really musical. This is how I would typically play a swell. And the way that I was conducting the players, I didn't want it to be really strong, really loud. I just wanted it to come up more timbrally than anything else. And again, that little kind of fizzle that you hear, that's where I think the emotions live, particularly in the types of music that I write. Now, the Wild Wisps is very much similar to the Wisps, but we had a little bit of extra time at the end of the sessions, so we decided to record some multiphonics. And if you get the mod wheel right up at the very top, you can unleash all kinds of chaos. Across the top, we've got 4 main controls: dynamics, expression, color, and reverb. Dynamics allows you to crossfade between the different dynamic layers that we recorded, and this enables you to create crescendos and diminuendos in the way that a real player would. Expression is a volume change, and that is to contextualize it within your music, so you can kind of ride the volume level as you go. I tend to ride these 2 faders together, which gives it a really emotive and very dynamic feel to it as well. Next, we've got color, which I've got attached here to this knob, and so this just gives us a little bit of control over the tone. Because I mix these samples, I quite like them where they are, but it is nice to be able to dial in a little bit more of the breath or a little bit more of those kind of low fundamentals. This library was recorded at Press Play, which is quite a small studio, and that means that even our room mics captured a really intimate recording without having the tail of the room bleed over too much. This was quite a conscious decision for us because we found that in the types of music that we like to produce, either film music or for me more on my kind of pop and contemporary side of things, in both cases we tend to prefer drier libraries that we can add reverb to later. And so the 4th control across this top panel is reverb, allowing you to switch between a room, a hall, or the shimmer reverb, which is another effect altogether. And if you hit this little cog here, you can change between different settings. So I've got it on the hall at the moment. The room is lovely, and shimmer is my favorite. On the right hand side here, we've got our Atmos layers, starting with our raw layer, which is the samples you've been hearing, and you can mute and solo with the buttons, and you can also purge the samples with this little off switch, which is helpful if you want to save a little bit of RAM. We've then got 3 slots for atmosphere layers. These are extra sounds that you might want to use in conjunction with the raw samples to give it a slightly more hybrid sound. And you can select them here from this list. We've got 9 to choose from. Some of these have been created from the samples. Some of them are more synth-based textures that I think work really well with the samples. And then we've also got the Sine Plus layer, which, if you're familiar with my YouTube channel, is something that I go back to again and again, which is just a very simple sine wave that's been mangled in some ways to make it a little bit more, it sticks out a bit more in a mix. And as I was playing with the raw samples, it was something that I realized I needed to capture, because when you layer these together, it really kind of enforces that low end. Let me take you through some of the other atmosphere layers that we've got here. This is called Earth. And the mod wheel also controls atmosphere intensity, so it does actually change the sound in the same way. It evolves much as the samples do from the raw layers. This is called Marsh. Moss. I created these from the soft accents. There's something nice about using these just as little markers. Flourish. There's some octave stuff happening in this one, which I really like. Next is Root. It's your soft pad sound, which I find is really useful for really bedding into any kind of arrangement. Dew. And finally, Heath. Let me take you into the alt ensemble now. Some differences here. The Wisps remain as they are, as do the soft accents. The swells are now tempo synced. So now if I change my tempo, really useful. And then you can see these are the trills that we recorded. So if you do want to get that kind of control, which I still like using every now and again. Sounds a little bit ominous. And then of course we've got these multiphonics on their own. Now we've done an alt version of the smart trills. This is basically, it's the smart trills as you know them, but it's also got the Wisps underneath. This makes for a much richer texture, which might be useful for you. Now, as I said before, you've got the control to have the high winds and low winds. So this is the high winds. And then this is the low winds. So as you can hear, there's a lot of overlap here, but of course we're favouring bass flutes, bass clarinet, baritone sax, those darker, woodier sounds. And then with the high winds, it's more of your clarinets and concert flutes. So I think this is a really nice blend. And, you know, I definitely still use high winds or low winds as opposed to just the ensemble. I think the ensemble is just really good for getting started quickly. With this little cog here, we have a few more options. We've got some tightness control, which changes the sample start. If you want a slightly tighter start, it doesn't sound quite so realistic, but it might be helpful if you need a bit more front on the note. We've got dynamic range, which is a really useful feature. So if I turn this all the way up, versus now this still cycles between the different dynamic layers, but as you can hear, it becomes much more timbral, much less about volume. Now we've got key switches for getting around the different articulations, and then I love that we've got the credits here of all the people who've performed on this library. And that's pretty much it. Do subscribe if you haven't done already, and do watch the launch film down below if you want to see how we went about recording this thing, and also meet the players as well, because they were a lovely bunch to have around for a few days. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Goodbye.